As far as Pulsechain goes, we're still waiting on devs to finish it. It's not ready yet, so we're still working on validator jailing and rotation and refactoring and moving things from inside the EVM to outside the EVM, so they're a lot faster, so we don't fill up the blocks. So basically, let me explain this to you guys. The slowest part of Ethereum is the EVM. It limits all your throughput. And while the existing infrastructure we have now can do, 4x, 10x, 40x, depending on what settings we use for maximum gas, because the block times are 3 times faster, you can fill up all that space with internal mechanics that you need to keep everything working right. So if people stake and they delegate, and those people that delegated need paid for those stakes, well, then those transactions will suck up space from the blockchain. And you don't want to suck up all the space from the blockchain with internal overhead. So if you can shift a lot of the internal overhead outside of the EVM, then you can maintain your throughput and then have all of the, you don't want a denial of service vector to be delegating stake. And so there's this art of picking limits, picking maximums, picking which things are inside the EVM or not. And we're just optimizing those things. And to tell you the truth, in a terrible bear market, it's a great time to optimize those things anyway. So it's a good coincidence.
They're doing something as far as validator jailing. Also, what does that mean in dev words or whatever? Because that's what he also said that they're working on.
The felony part of it.
Yeah, it's locking out the validator node from the next rotation or next few rotations until basically the felonies are removed. So once it becomes a validator and it gets so many strikes against it, right? It gets the misdemeanors and felonies, and it gets kicked out of rotation like immediately. But then the next rotation, it should be in jail, right, until some amount of time goes by where basically will slowly remove the strikes against you until they don't have the misdemeanors or felonies, right, against them, right? And so they're trying to figure out, I guess, when, how long do they keep them out? Maybe, how fast do they remove the strikes? And just make sure that they actually get, removed and can't come back the next rotation. Because originally on testnet, they were getting the strikes, they were getting knocked out, but then the next round they'd come right back in, right? And so they do have to wait another 12 hours, right? Or 8 hours, whatever it was, to kick them out again. And so that was an issue.
Hey, PulseX, is that something that can be adjusted after launch? Or has that got to be laid in concrete pre-launch?
No, that can be adjusted later. It's not a huge deal. It's just nice to get dealt with, up front.
If folks could launch now, like in the market we're in right now, where we're at, would you want them to launch it right now?
If Richard is waiting for the bottom market, he could just say that, and I think everybody understand.
I don't think that's something he can say. I don't think he's already pretty much said it. I think. He can infer that. I don't think he could just straight out say that.
Well, he has said in previous live streams that the best time to launch anything is at the bottom, and the worst time is at the top. He said that.
True.
So I expect him to launch his own project in keeping with that sort of logic.
I think that's what he's pretty much gonna do. He's just not gonna come up and say it.
But why not? I think if it makes sense, it makes him look smart.
Well,
say what?
Because he does say it, it's like his product is ready, but he's timing the market, and you can't say, oh, I'm timing the market.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like when I asked him, and everyone's seen it, he said he wasn't. He said he prefers to launch it as soon as possible, and because there's also opportunity cost to delaying, right? But then we know that he prefers to launch something at the bottom. So the fact that Pulse isn't done yet, like it's still being optimized, and that's good.
Exactly.
And the fact that the bear has come to him, and there's only, you can deduce. He says it's generally a year from the top to the bottom. He said that in the live stream. It's coming to him, so it's a good thing. But yeah, he doesn't, it's like he doesn't come out and just say things sometimes. It's just, sometimes there's no reason to say something, right? You can infer, you can imply, you can share your methodology, your ideology of how you would do this and how you do that, so somebody can get a good thought consensus on what a person would do. But sometimes it's just one of those need to know basis. Like sometimes you just don't need to. The second that you say something, what happens? You trap yourself into a thing. You trap yourself into a time frame. You trap yourself into a launch. You trap yourself into, people having more expectations or something. He is just strategic in what he freaking puts out there. It is what it is. I mean, you can see that Richard wants Pulsechain to launch and have that awesome uptime like Hex has. He said it. They're doing everything they possibly can to do that. But at the same time, here comes this bear market, and we know he likes to launch him into bear. So,
all right, so let's talk about the third thing that Richard talked about that the devs are going to fix, and see if somebody else that can explain it better. He was talking about that they're moving things in out of the EVM to make it run faster, and then I didn't know what that meant, so I looked it up, and it says electronic voting standard. But can somebody explain that part, the EVM part of what the devs are fixing on?
Anything that happens on the EVM or in the EVM is part of the blockchain, right? So, it's got to be basically done within the blockchain code, and it can get recorded basically, within the block. If you're using that for kind of this overhead, part of the validator rotation or whatever, then you're just writing overhead to the blocks, right? And so you want to minimize the amount of overhead you're writing to the blocks, and you just want to write, the actual data that you need. And so if they can move some of that code out, just to the Go Pulse code, because it's not necessary, right, to have a log of exactly what happened in those cases, because it's just maintenance, or overhead stuff, then, that leaves more room for transactions, right, and other, contract code to actually be run on the blockchain.